Much, Dr. Dollar, for the wonderful introduction. I didn't expect it to be that long, but with like revealing my whole life story. But without further ado, I'll get into my presentation. So tonight I'll be talking about the research I've been doing in northern Kenya, and in particular Marsabit County, and I'll be explaining more about that very shortly. But the idea of this presentation is to allow the young generation, which is dominating this audience today, to figure out and to learn that you don't have to have your bachelor's degree before you can start doing good things that will change the world. And tonight I'll be sharing more about how this has worked for me, and where it's taken me, and where it's going to take me in the future. And so to begin with, I'll start by letting you know where Kenya lies. Kenya is lies on the east coast of Africa. In terms of area-wise, it's 224,960 square miles. In comparison to the US is 3.797 million square miles. So roughly, Kenya is about 17 times smaller than this country, but a very interesting country for that matter, because it's commonly referred to as the safari capital of Africa. Now, this is the map of Kenya. Our neighbors to the west are Uganda, to the far east is Somalia, to the north we have Ethiopia, and to the south we have Tanzania. And to give you reference as we move forward, I'd like you all to memorize or to learn that lake there is Lake Turkana, and Marsabit is actually where that camel is. So whenever you see future slides that I'll be showing and you see that lake, you'll have quick reference to where I'm referring to. Nairobi, our capital, is down here in the south. And so what makes Kenya very rich in biodiversity is the geographical landscape that we call tablelands. Now, this is a bit of a complex feature, so bear with me as I explain to you more. So if you look here on the map, you have these different shades of green, pale yellow, and going into darker colors. So essentially, these are like long steps in a staircase. And they start off from the coast, rising all the way to our eastern and western highlands. And interestingly, Kenya is also blessed to have the Rift Valley, which cuts right through the highlands and creates this very huge depression. But anyway, what that means is that from each tableland that we go, as I've summarized here, wherever we have a geographical landscape interact with another, in this case, like where we have the ocean meet the land, that's what we call a biodiversity hotspot, because you have animals from the ocean and animals from the land come together within a certain area. Now, likewise, going inland, we have what we call the tablelands, and this creates very unique biodiversity hotspots, because as opposed to having a water body and a land body meet, you have an area that's very high in altitude go down and meet an area that's low in altitude. And what that means is different vegetation grow in different altitudes. And so having different vegetation in different altitudes also means that you have different animals. And therefore, if we have animals that are in this area here, and we have animals that are in this area here, where they meet, where the land rises, that's what we call a biodiversity hotspot, and that enables Kenya to have very rich variety of animals. Then interestingly, when you come to the Great Rift Valley, because you have the valley split these tablelands into east and west, this whole area of the Rift Valley as a whole is a biodiversity hotspot. And a lot of tourists flock to a place called Lake Naivasha, which is this blue dot here, to see a lot of bird life in the country. So what this means is Kenya has 390 species of mammals, as an example. That's a very high number of mammals in a very small area comparatively. And what you're seeing here is the Rothschild giraffe and the Burchell zebra. That's part of the animals found there. But we also have the big five, and I kind of don't know what happened to that slide. Oh, sorry, it's here. We have the big five. Now, the big five are not animals described by the size they are, but actually these are animals that during the trophy hunting days in Africa, these animals were prized highly in the world market for the products or the commodities that were sold from them. So for instance, the buffalo, the skull and its horns were very high priced commodities. For the rhino, of course, we all know it's the horn. For the leopard, it's its beautiful skin. For the lion, it's the claws and teeth. And for the elephant, it's the ivory, and that's the tusks for that matter. And just to go back to this slide, comparatively, Kenya has 1,105 species of birds. That's a very high number for a very small area. Now, the United States as a country has 1,107. And remember, the US is 17 times larger than Kenya. So supposing our borders of Kenya were larger to the size of the US or even half the size, that's a very high biodiversity. And that biodiversity and richness in the bird species is brought because of the tablelands. And so now moving on to narrowing my presentation now that you have a general understanding of Kenya as a country, we're going to move from here to northern Kenya. Now, northern Kenya has been a place that's been largely unexplored for very many years, and even up to today, very vast areas are not well studied. But there are three notable explorations that I tend to refer back whenever I'm doing research. And this is by Count Teleki, an Austrian explorer back in 1893, Dr. Arthur Smith from 1895, and John Hillaby in 1967. Now for this presentation, I'll be focusing on Dr. Arthur Smith, one, because he's an American explorer, and my audience is American largely, so there's some connections there. And two, because he contributed a lot of knowledge to the understanding of northern Kenya. And so it's important to see or learn more about what he did. So his expedition, again, this is Kenya. Now this is the larger East Africa, so you have Uganda, Tanzania, Somalia, Ethiopia, and the other countries. So his expedition started in Somalia and went through Ethiopia and came into Kenya from the north. Again, this is Lake Turkana, and went through central Kenya, going back to Yemen in Aden via the sea route. But my area of interest is actually this yellow square there, because that square there is actually this map. This was a map taken during his expedition. And this red line here, if you can follow the red dot, was his actual route whilst he was exploring the region. And then once again, this is Lake Turkana. Back in the days, it was known as Lake Rudolph. What this slide shows you is that despite his immense contribution to scientific studies and our understanding of the region, that was just part of his journey. And so you have vast areas that are blank, empty spots on the map, and these areas, even today, remain the same. And so this kind of maps, solidified my interest and curiosity to one day go to Marsabit and learn more about this landscape. What was interesting about Dr. Smith's expedition is that during his time in northern Kenya, he encountered a lot of wildlife. And for example, you can see he had an encounter with a lion there, which was very dangerous to them. And he also got chased by elephants, and this was very frequently. And this kind of gives you an idea that that Marsabit region had very unique megafauna, so big animals at the time. And if a region like that could support big animals, it means the number of smaller animals were very, very many. And not only was he being chased by elephants, but later on, about 80 years later, in the 1970s, we had what were known as super tuskers. Now, tuskers are elephants that have huge tusks that scrape the ground, or nearly scrape the ground as they move about. And so this particular elephant, known as Ahmed of Marsabit, was given presidential protection because of the ivory you're seeing him carry there. Each of those tusks weighed 130 pounds, or at least 55 kilograms. So very unique to the region. And now compare Ahmed of Marsabit with the modern day elephant. You see there's a huge difference in the tusks they carry nowadays, and that's a full-grown bull. Same with Ahmed of Marsabit. So it kind of gives you an idea of how the past was by digging into the archives and finding out more about this. Now, no, you're not looking at Mars. In fact, this is Marsabit. You'll also be forgiven if you thought this was a planet where Yoda had mysteriously disappeared. But this is the special place called Marsabit, as seen from a satellite image. This is Lake Turkana once again for your reference. And by looking at this image, you can tell that it's quite dry by the look of it. It's like, it's dry, it's shadeless, it's hot, and for the most part of that landscape, it's waterless. But do not let that fool you. That image there sparked that interest in me to, again, travel and find out what's actually on the ground as opposed to seeing satellite images like this. And so my hitchhiking adventures began, which is a very interesting story where after I'd completed high school and I was trying to wonder what to do with myself, and having read these accounts of these explorers, my dad one day told me that, if you want to figure out what you're going to do in university, just take a 1-year break. And with this 1-year break, do anything you like, and that is going to help you figure out what you're going to do in the future. And because of that kind of advice and the support from my father, that I was able to find my way into northern Kenya, which was in the form of hitchhiking. It's very interesting because my dad, being a former principal, was not blessed to have money, and so he just gave me the equivalent of $10 to go on a 2-week expedition and find my way around with just $10. And it's very interesting how when you're put in such a situation, you can make the best out of it. And interestingly, I came back with that $10 that he had given me and managed to survive throughout that period. And so during my travels, I saw very interesting features that in Nairobi and in southern Kenya you rarely get to see. And these are what are known as insel bugs. So briefly, an insel bug is when you have a volcanic eruption, sometimes the magma doesn't intrude into the surface. So it's left subsurface. And so for millions of years, as erosion takes place or weathering takes place, it breaks down the surrounding areas. So this feature you're seeing was once under the soil. But erosion and weathering and tectonic and geological forces have shifted what was above it, and what you see is that magma that was hidden for very many years. And I also got the opportunity to see sand dunes for the first time, actually, being such an arid landscape where I had sand dunes and I could, explore this kind of regions. I got to see rocky plains. Now, for those who have ever driven over Cobble Street, it's not a very pleasant ride. But now just imagine driving over these things for miles and miles and miles. It's a bone-jarring ride, and internal organs get rearranged, and trust me, it is, it's a mess. But the interest and the passion, to see places that very few people get to see, kept me going, and I managed to put up with this rough terrain. But equally, just like everything has, the yin and yang, the desert also offers you salt pans, and these places are flat, and progress driving into the salt pans is very smooth, and it's very joyous as well to be in such kind of landscapes. I also had the opportunity to meet indigenous tribes still practicing their culture in northern Kenya. Now, this is a group of Dasanach children. I had the privilege of meeting them close to the Ethiopian border, and they're still practicing their cultures even today. And so, getting out there and learning more about this kind of people was very interesting for me. And if I had not taken that chance, I wouldn't have been able to engage with them. Also, you get to meet different tribes. So Marsabit as a county has 14 different ethnic tribes. And so this man is from the Gabra tribe. And when I got to meet him during my travels, he was very fascinated about what I was doing, and that my travels had brought me to his, his territory. And as a sign of the good relations I had, he gave me what you see here me wearing as a bracelet, but it's actually goat skin. So what that symbolizes is anytime I'm going to northern Kenya and I wear that goat skin around my wrist, any person from the Gabra tribe will know that this person has been welcomed to the society, and so they know I'm not a threat. I'm not a threat, and they can assist me with whatever I need. And that led me into going into very different regions like this, lava rocks and lava flows. Now, this is a very special image to me because the results or what happens next became a life-changing experience for me. So we were driving over these lava rocks about 4 years ago when I was going to a place called Loyangalani, which is on the east coast of Lake Turkana. And when we were driving along these places, my dad had told me that when you get to a certain area, you're going to find these huge boulders, which is what I was now seeing. And if you're able to split these rocks in half, what you find inside is white or blue crystals, very beautiful. He told me that stone is known as the blue agate, if it's blue in color. And if it's white in color, it's known as the white agate. And so with this knowledge and this interest, I was thinking about, telling the driver to stop. Now remember, I'm hitchhiking, I'm not driving on my own. And this thought occurred to me once. And I said, I'm just a young guy, and these guys are doing their work, because they were going actually to address some administrative issues at that village. And if I tell them to stop, they think I'm becoming too much, and they might as well just kick me out. But this thought occurred to me as we kept driving. This thought occurred to me the second time, and again I was, no, just forget it. But the third time this thought occurred to me, I said, stop! And the guy was shocked, but he halted the vehicle, and he looked at me. I told him I need to take a rock sample. And everyone got out. We happened to be carrying some tribesmen from a certain village called Gas, and we were taking them to Loyangalani, so they also jumped out and they were happy to relieve themselves. And by relieve themselves, I mean they will pee and water the small grass you're seeing there. But for me, it was an opportunity to get that rock. But before I could go and grab the rock I was wanting to take, a funny thought just occurred to me and said, how about you take a photograph of this landscape, because you'll need to reference it in the future. And so I took out my small Samsung digital camera, which, by the way, I had taken, it was my father's camera, but I had taken it without his permission, and he didn't know all this time where it was. So meanwhile, back home, as he's trying to find the camera and scolding my siblings about the loss of the camera, I am busy taking this image. So I took this image, and suddenly, as I was going to take the image of the actual rock I was going to pick, something darted in and out of the rock. And the guy who was behind me, he quickly jumped into the vehicle. And I was like, why did he jump? And I noticed he was barefoot and I was wearing boots. So I thought, maybe it was a scorpion or some creature. And because he's barefoot and I have boots, why should I bother? But anyway, what happened next became a life-changing situation, because that led to the discovery of a very strikingly beautiful and golden-haired camel spider. Yes. And to give you an idea of how big, as I christened it, Goldie, is, like you all to put your palms out for a moment. Now imagine Goldie sitting on your palm. For the average-sized hand, Goldie would span from the wrist to your fingertips. Yeah. Now how about that? So What's interesting about Goldie and this particular image that you're seeing is that it's the only image ever taken of that camel spider, and that image belongs to me. So anyway, what happened after that is that I realized, a lot of, if I could go at 17 and take a photograph of something unintentionally that would end up being a new discovery to scientific knowledge, what more would I find if I actually set out with an actual mission to go and find creatures and discover this landscape? So that's when I founded the Explorers Club of Kenya. And the objectives is to actually explore, research, and conserve little-known places in East Africa, such as Marsabit, which is our focus. We publish the Explorer magazine, and for those who may be interested in having a copy of our latest issue, I have it here for free. You can grab one as you head out. And we carry out environmental awareness and practice charity wherever possible. And so eventually, as I was at the National Museums of Kenya, because they're the ones actually who broke the news to me that this was a new species of spider that I had discovered, it led me to start going out into the field. They taught me a bit of research methods and how to collect specimens in the field. And they told me, being a government organization, we can't really give you the funds to travel. But what we can do is we can arm you with the knowledge and the expertise on how to collect the specimens and give you small equipment that you'd use during your field research, and the rest is up to you. So now again, I was scratching my head wondering how am I going to go back to northern Kenya. But luckily, the Kenyan people are very friendly, and so I contacted the people who had given me the rides to the different parts of northern Kenya, and they were happy enough again to offer me that service. So I hitchhiked with them again, and now this was me in the field doing various research. This image is very interesting because this was in 2015, and 2 semesters of eating Catawba food, and this is how I look nowadays. Some people have told me I've gained weight. Yeah, but generally this is how my fieldwork looks like. We work with local people on the ground to try and find Goldie, but finding Goldie is very difficult because we have to overturn stones and see if Goldie is lying beneath those stones. And now this is where Goldie stays. There's so many stones to unturn, and you can't even set traps very easily. So for this reason, Goldie, for the past 5 years, has remained an elusive camel spider. But anyway, that doesn't stop us. Actually, what happened is the district commissioner and the area chief became interested in my activities there and would occasionally stop what they were doing to start unturning scrub like this to look for Goldie, because it became a very mysterious creature, and they were now becoming interested in learning more about it. Eventually, I couldn't sustain my activities, with $10 from my dad every time, but and free rides from well-wishers. But eventually, I applied for a grant to the National Geographic Society, and to my surprise, I was awarded funds to carry out further research on that, and that's actually how I got into the National Geographic Society. Then later on, we had the privilege and honor of having the only camel spider expert in the whole continental Africa join us on our expedition to try and find Goldie, and this is her, Dr. Tarina Bud, and that's part of my team. We have 2 local field assistants and Mr. Mike Clifton, who is actually a British national who also joined the expedition to try and help me find Goldie, and do also other entomological studies, the studies of insects for that matter. And so part of the fieldwork looks like this. We actually set simple traps like pitfall traps, and it involves going every morning to see whether Goldie has been trapped, but Goldie is too smart for pitfall traps. And it was, anyway, it was 2 weeks of learning with Dr. Tarina Bird in the field, and I gained a lot of knowledge about the habitat and how to better refine my research projects. And it also was a very huge learning curve for me. And that eventually led to me giving a TED talk in Nairobi, which was a very huge conference that attracted over 700 people from different parts of Africa and the world. And although this newspaper article says boy lands on new spider in Marsabit, I'm happy to report I'm now Kenya's Spider-Man. Yeah. So interestingly, the story didn't end there. Something about Marsabit was beckoning me to go back and to explore and find out more about the landscape. And so again, I was back poring over satellite images and maps. But this time, I was interested in this green spot on the map, which is a place called Mount Marsabit. And as you can see, again, it's the same image except I've zoomed in, and Lake Turkana would be to the west of Mount Marsabit, and against the same dry area, same arid landscape. But this green spot was very interesting to me. I was wanting to find out how comes there's a green spot in the middle of all this dryness. And that green spot looks like this on the ground. That's Mount Marsabit for you. This is one of the hardest mountains to photograph because it's very wide. It's actually a shield volcano. And a shield volcano is a volcano that when it erupts, the lava is more like porridge as opposed to like a muffin or something more solidified. And so what that means, as the magma erupts from the ground surface, it spreads wider as opposed to spreading taller. So it doesn't look like much from this point, but this volcano is very wide in its base. And you'll be seeing more images of it later. And this is during the dry season, and it doesn't look like there's much in it, but when you go there during the wet season, you realize that inside the mountain it's actually very beautiful. And this is a type of forest called the euphorbia forests that are found in one of the depressions and the craters that abound in Marsabit. And interestingly, there are also these lush vegetations and ravines that are pouring out springs of water into the surrounding landscape. And as you can see, the forest is very thick, a lot of flowers here and there, a lot of fruits and berries, like this is wild coffee. And all that is found in Marsabit. But as if that's not enough, at its highest summit is this beautiful crater lake. And interestingly, it's aptly called Lake Paradise, and it was actually named that by Osa and Martin Johnson, who are again American explorers back in 1905. And those two couple, that couple actually spent over 20 years on the mountain going back and forth because they enjoyed that landscape and found it very beautiful. And I can understand why, because ever since I set foot in Marsabit, there's no year that has gone by without me traveling there, including this summer again. And so some of the animals that can be found in the mountain include all these dung beetles, caterpillars. We have the impala. That bird species right there is known as the Egyptian vultures. Now, I'm not too much of an ornithologist, but my thinking is that Marsabit is so special that even birds from Egypt are coming there to reside. So and you have other reptiles and birds like herons. But this main image here, what we call the gravy zebra. Now, the gravy zebra are an endangered species of zebra that are found only in northern Kenya and nowhere else in Africa. And Marsabit is home to a very healthy population of the same. And then, of course, we have elephants in the region. This guy looks brown because he's had a mud bath. Then the, the antelope you see there at the bottom, if you notice, it has a very long neck, starts from its head going down there. That's what many people call the giraffe-necked antelope, but we actually call it, and the local people call it, the gerenuk. And the bird at the top there, I mean, he's a bastard for showing me his backside. But actually, the bird is actually Huglin's bastard. BU, yeah. So a bit confusing there. Yeah, but very difficult birds to photograph because they always scamper into the bush and somewhat, as you can see from this image, blend with the surroundings. And so after that, I started wondering, after the discovery of Goldie and having traveled to Mount Marsabit and the deserts surrounding it, often wondered how Lake Paradise got its water. Because when you look at that image, this panoramic shot, you can clearly see there's no visible inlet or outlet going into that lake. But interestingly, that lake is fresh, and from all the records I could find from the archives, from the accounts of various explorers over the years, and people's travels, they've always taken very beautiful photos of that lake without it being dry. So it was kind of, what's going on there? And I also began wondering, how did oases, get water in the desert? Like, I mean, where does this water come from? Yet this landscape is very dry from the outlook of it. But to answer this question, I needed to look at the broader picture and to find out from a wider perspective what's going on the landscape. That meant, again, I had to pore over maps. I'm very fond of maps because if you are able to interpret a map, you can get out a lot of information from one. And so this image again shows now the eastern side of Kenya and more of Somalia from this line going forwards. And the blue down there is the Indian Ocean. And to the north is Ethiopia. That red spot there at the north is a border control post. It's the only way I could actually get this image very quickly, so I typed in Mandera border post, and then that red dot even didn't disappear after I found the results. But anyway, now once you look out and see the landscape from this angle, you realize that the trade winds that are coming from the Indian Ocean, coming in from Somalia, have no high point whatsoever. So all this land here from the Indian Ocean coming up towards Marsabit here in the yellow circle, there's no high landscape. So the wind comes with all the moisture it brings from the ocean. And when it gets to Mount Marsabit, because it finds this huge mountain area, the wind rises, and as it rises, we all know the higher you go, the cooler it gets. And so the moisture therefore condenses, and interestingly in Marsabit, it will either rain, or it will either be foggy, misty, or you'll find dew in the morning on the mountain. And so that concept of having wind bring water from the Indian Ocean is actually vital for the whole landscape you're seeing there. Because from there, the trees are able to absorb this moisture, just like the way if you put a sponge under the sink, it will absorb in all the moisture from the tap. So likewise, the trees are doing that function of absorbing that water, and from there, they're able to release it slowly into the landscape. And I'll explain more a bit about that in a second. And actually, when you're on the ground, you can see these various signs telling you, beware of strong crosswinds. These crosswinds they're referring to are the trade winds that are coming from Marsabit, from the Indian Ocean going into Marsabit. Now, this image is not very clear, but it kind of gives you an understanding of how big Marsabit is. So start from this red dot and follow me. everything you're seeing here and behind that, that post, all that, it's very faint, that landscape, hilly, going all the way, that is Mount Marsabit. So you can see it's a very huge mountain. And that's why I was telling you earlier that it's a very difficult mountain to photograph, because you can't get the size of it in one, through images or through, videos. And so that's why looking from the outside and understanding its size on maps is very important. Now here's a very crude image I drew when I was 17 about the landscape, trying to understand more about what's going on underground. And I promise after I take my GIS lessons this coming semester, you won't be seeing such weird 6-year-old painting kind of things. But bear with me on this one, because there's a lot going here and it's important for you to understand. So once again, we have Marsabit here, the mountain, that's Lake Paradise for your reference. Then we have Chalbi Desert, that's the salt pan you were seeing earlier on. These dark spots here are the lava rocks I was referring to. And this side here is where Goldie site is. My project site is actually here. And this is just dry, arid landscape. But when you look below the surface, this darker color, begin to understand how water from the trees gets infiltrated into the ground. So the landscape of Marsabit has various faults that can be seen, like in places like this. This is a natural fault, and when you're there on the ground, you can actually see a 100-meter drop, about 330 feet drop of the landscape. And where all you see faults is, interestingly, where all the oases are, and the oases are these green and blue dots on the map. So once the trees absorb this moisture, it infiltrates into the soil and goes into what's known as an aquifer, or a rock that bears water. And with that water underground, it's able to move through from the mountain slope going down into the desert landscapes below. But the question is, how does it then bubble up? Because this water is down. Again, now you have a whole mountain here, Mount Marsabit. Then towards the north, you have Huri Hills up there. Then you have very funny landscapes like this called Dabandabli, which is like a hill or rocky outcrop. And then you have this Asie Hills, which is, in geography we call them pediments, that are putting pressure on the aquifer below. So this pressure that we have on the aquifer is able to put pressure enough such that water bubbles out. And with that, you're able to have the oases have water throughout the year. And so this is how it looks like on the slopes of the mountain. It's very lush again. Pastoralists are able to feed their goats, and an insert there shows the kind of water that's flowing through the landscape, and people have livestock. At the back there we have Mount Marsabit again, and water flows from the surface when it rains and collects in water pans like this. And in the desert, this is how the oasis looks like. And so looking at this, you can tell the water is very clean. And that water is clean because it's filtered through the underground rock as it gets towards the oasis. So actually people in the desert and the wildlife have very clean water to drink. And I've actually drunk from oases like this, and I never got sick. And that's nature's way of providing the desert landscapes with water. But unfortunately, every year Kenya is rocked with very high prevalence of drought, year in, year out. And as you can see from that circle there, Marsabit is one of the regions that is affected. And this causes the drying up of rivers, the water levels drop, and it really affects the livelihoods of people. And it's not a very good situation. And from here, like you can see here, in the neighboring county of Laikipia, as a result of lack of water, people start fighting because that is a very vital resource. And unfortunately in Marsabit, occasionally people end up dying. And this is the kind of situation people are resulted to drink water from the rock or the sand directly. So it's not a situation that's humane, and it makes life very difficult for people. And so again, I was wondering why there were these constant water shortages, yet over 120 years ago, I was reading in the books that there were elephant and rhino and antelope in plenty, and so there must have been enough vegetation to support them. But I ended up finding out that, again, unfortunately, Mount Marsabit is at the end of, is actually being deforested, as you can see in this image. And out of a 16,000 hectare forest, every year 1.6 hectares is lost to deforestation. And so instead of continuing my exploration and just enjoying the landscape, I decided to be part and parcel of it by actually starting to do conservation efforts to improve this landscape from being dry like this to being lush and full of vegetation. So I started doing workshops with students. This was one workshop I did last year. We had primary school students and secondary school students, and I was able to educate them more about the importance of the environment and how they can start doing localized efforts to fight climate change and desertification, because that region is very prone to that. I even got my dad involved in my project. Being a former principal and therefore a former teacher, he was able to get the attention of the young ones and make my work at least easier. And some of the work we do is conducting BioBlitz, which as you know, are outdoor environmental programs. So we take the children out, we contact local partners like the wildlife rangers in this image there. That's a wildlife ranger, Kenya Wildlife Service ranger. My former professor from Kenyatta University was also interested in the work I was doing, so he joined me. So different experts were able to tell more about the work they do. So like the wildlife ranger, what it's like to be a wildlife ranger, what it's like to be an ecologist, what it's like to be the county director for environment in the region. And that was a program that was very beneficial to the students. And as a result of that, some students relay back the message they have learned through images like this, where they do artwork showcasing their own school students, where they put this like in the billboards of their school, and students other students who didn't participate in the workshop were able to learn more about the environment. And like in this image here, the girls here were actually doing a dance or a drama play for us and telling us why illegal logging is bad for the environment. So this summer, I shall be doing a project to create what's known as a buffer zone around Mount Marsabit. A buffer zone is an area of trees that will be planted around the areas that have been deforested, and in the community areas where, as you can see in this image, these are trees that were previously dominating this landscape, but now it's grasses that have taken over. So having more trees means more rain is able to be absorbed, or more dew is able to be absorbed, and that improves the water security in the county. So what I'll be doing is we'll be planting several thousands of trees. My father, again, this was a previous tree planting activity we had done. But we'll be engaging the youth of the region with this tree planting exercise. And we're trying to fight drought, we're trying to fight desertification with this, and something called locust outbreaks, which if that occurs, it destroys all the vegetation, whether in the farmlands or in the forest. And so this project is actually meeting the sustainable pillars, or in other words, the triple bottom line. So the planet, people, and profit, and these are some of the ways it's doing that. So it's improving their livelihoods, it's providing them income because they're going to be selling the trees. It's reducing the cost of irrigation for farmers and other associated expenses they have. And as I mentioned, it's fighting climate change and desertification. And so students like Shuke Guyo, who was in my workshop, who attended my workshop last year, she's here, she's quite blended with the environment. She's very interested in participating in the upcoming project because it gives her something to do. She graduated from high school last year, end of last year, and now she awaits to get into college towards the end of this year. Instead of engaging in social vice or doing other things that are not friendly with society. As my dad used to tell me, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. And so if we don't engage youth like Shuke Guyo in doing constructive things, and in this case, helping fight climate change, they may be involved in wrong things. And so this coming summer, I'll be hosting a climate change workshop. We'll be establishing tree nurseries. We'll be also starting some beekeeping activities, and some people from the audience like Jonathan Pauls and Dr. Dollar will be assisting me with this activity. And in order to achieve the goals of this project, I'm looking to raise $11,000 between now and the end of this semester in order to have that project done successfully. And so this would involve buying at least 7,000 different indigenous trees, 90,000 seed balls. Seed balls are seeds that are coated with charcoal dust, and that allows goats not to eat them, and it gives them vital nutrients during those early stages as they start developing to grow faster. And so the time to act is now, because if we don't protect Mount Marsabit and expand the forest cover, desertification in all its wrath is going to affect the people of Marsabit. Now this image is the very low base of Marsabit, where the mountain ends and starts into the desert. And already desertification has affected these areas and is continuing to encroach higher. The peaks of Mount Marsabit, which are unclear in this image, again, the mountain is not photogenic, somewhere up here, but very far into the distance. So this is the time to act, because if we don't do anything now, we are going to lose a very important ecological feature that we have. So my future plans in Marsabit after I graduate from Catawba and armed with the knowledge, skills, and values that the college is preparing me for, I shall end up building up a research center in the coming years where I'll have a permanent base to assist the local communities, carry out my research projects, and do more exploration in the region. Because I would rather have a situation where, like Dr. Arthur Smith had, where his caravan was being charged by rhinos and elephants, than for that particular event to remain something that's historical. That's a better situation to deal with than to deal with an environment that's very degraded and animals are non-existent. So with that, I'd like to thank my parents who are not here and my siblings for the support and the encouragement they gave me, the former county commissioner of Marsabit, the district commissioner of Northor, who you had seen in the image, New Bantu Organic Detergents, and the National Geographic Society for funding the research work I've been doing over the years. And to particular members of the museum, Mr. Laban Joroge, Mr. Mike Clifton, and Dr. Tarina Bad, and of course my local guy on the ground, my Northern Projects coordinator, and various partners, and to thank Dr. Luke Dollar for the support and the encouragement he has also given me, because if it wasn't for that meeting we had in Washington, D.C., and that mentorship, I wouldn't be here presenting to you today. And so with that, I'd like to thank you so much for your time and for listening to my presentation. Thank you very much. I'm honored.
We have time for some questions, and then following the questions, we will have a reception back in the next room.
Yes.
So you said that the salt pans are formed because when it rains and then it dries, it's salt pans, right?
That's right. Although I didn't mention that, that's the absolute correct answer of how salt pans are formed. Oh, sorry. So she asked how salt pans are formed, and in this case, salt pans are formed when water from the above landscapes lies into a certain area, and because deserts are very hot, the evaporation takes all the water away and leaves salts. So in my slide on the salt pans, the white you were seeing was actually salt.
So when it refloods, is the water even palatable? Like, does the salt I don't know, does it become salt water when it refloods?
Yes. So she asked again, when the water floods into the salt pan, does that water particularly become salty? And the answer is yes. For extended periods of about 2 months, that water is salty, and actually people can't even pass through the salt pans. And that water, neither can it be used for domestic use or for watering livestock. Yes? How old am I? I am actually 22 years old right now. There's another question behind there.
Alberto, thanks for your time. I really love how your sense of wandering and wondering led you to this area of research, but also here to Catawba, and we all get to benefit from that. I also really like how you work this skill of thievery with your dad's camera, so I'd be interested to hear how he reacted to that once you actually returned the camera. But I guess my question is, since you are a student of the environment, and from our last conversation, biology as well, how does the local lore, the music, the poetry, the folklore of this area also inform what it is you're studying and learning about this land and its history?
So, interestingly, in order to conduct environmental conservation, you have to involve the people. And involving the people means you have to become a local. And that's why, like I had shown you a slide, I was given the goat skin, which enables me, work with the people. But to answer your question, you have to first understand the culture and understand the traditions that are already being practiced, and go with an open mind that whatever you say or whatever ideas you propose can actually be rejected, and there's not much you can do about that if that happens. But you also have to be persistent in the way you conduct yourself, be very formal and be very polite. And with that, with that understanding of how different tribes, as I'd mentioned, there are 14 different tribes, how each of those tribes have their own social customs and how they believe in different things, leverage that understanding to your advantage, and with that draw some lessons from what a particular tribe is saying and what you have learned elsewhere, and merge those two together to do environmental conservation. And so that's actually the strategy I've been using for the work I've been doing with the students, and now going forwards I'll be working with a lot of community members as well, the same. Yes?
Or is this logging done by the tribes who live there, number one?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it logging not necessarily to take stuff out, but for burning, for fuel? And in which case, how are you addressing that?
So that's a very good question, and thank you for posing that. So the deforestation, as I'd mentioned, is 1.6 hectares in an area of 16,000 hectares. Comparatively, that's a very small number for an annual deforestation number. That deforestation is because they need timber for constructing their homesteads or for creating kraals for where their livestock are going to be held during the night. and it's also used for firewood. Now, part of how I'm going to address this need, because that's a need at present that is vital, and there's no way they can buy like LPG, liquid petroleum gas for their cooking and heating. In this case, we have what are known as exotic trees in Kenya, which are actually fast-growing trees. And an example is the silk oak tree. It's a softwood and it grows very fast. So my project is going to be incorporating some silk oak trees with the indigenous trees, so that as they grow the trees, the silk oak trees are going to serve the purpose of giving them food, giving them fuel to cook their food, and giving them timber to create their houses or for other furniture. And the good thing about the silk oak tree is that it's a very fast-growing tree, and on the other hand, the indigenous trees are actually quite slow-growing. So having that will enable they don't go into the forest, but instead now harvest their own timber from the trees they have. And I'm working with the Kenya Forest Service on this project, who are guiding me also on what kind of trees to plant in given areas, because the area that you'd plant 10 kilometers away from the mountain would be very different from what you'd plant near the town. And so having that kind of balance is important. Yes, Kelly.
Hey Alberto, thanks for your talk. I just wanted to ask you, how can we help you in reaching your mission and your lofty goals by the end of the semester?
So, thank you very much. So part of, one way you can actually help me is, as a community, is by giving me lessons that I could take from North America. And I like the idea of I've been learning about the Dust Bowl in Dr. Bolin's class. And that is a very strong lesson that I could pick up from North America and tell the people of Marsabit before it actually affects them, that this is what can happen if you don't take care of your trees and soil erosion occurs. And the second lesson, or the second assistance that I could get from the community is helping me fundraise the required funds of $11,000 to help the startup projects kick off. And for the youth, I'm aiming at 70 unemployed youth in this case, for them to have something to do, because the same youth who are unemployed are the same people who are actually going into the forest to cut down the trees, like in the night when no one is seen. And so if these people have a sustainable and alternative source of income, then we are meeting two things. We are expanding the forest, and at the same time we are stopping deforestation. So that's the kind of assistance I'm actually humbly requesting the audience tonight to help me with. Thank you. Yes.
The trees that you're talking about planting, are they indigenous to the area, or because you said that they were faster growing than the normal trees? And that's why I was wondering, you're not going to plant something like the autumn olive that was done here, that things that just take over that.
Yes, so actually, as I had mentioned earlier, I'll be mixing the silk oak trees with indigenous trees that I'm working with the Kenya Forest Service on identifying. So the trees will actually, the indigenous trees will be native to that particular region in Marsabit. Now, given that it's a mountain, a different section of the mountain will have different trees from a section, let's say, below it. So working with the Kenya Forest Service on identifying which particular trees for this area of altitude and which particular trees for this area is key to ensuring that we don't have other unintended issues occurring, like having invasive trees now just dominate the landscape. So that's how we are moving forward with that. Any other questions?
Can you recover an area that has been totally deforested over a large area and become a desert?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Can you, by the method you talked, recover an area that has, a rather large area, that has been totally stripped of forest and cover?
Yes, the answer is yes. With community efforts and with environmental awareness and education about the effects of deforestation, it's very possible to recover an area that's been lost already to deforestation. What it needs is very rigorous efforts and dedication by the community members themselves to understand that if we don't recover this area, it's going to increase and get into higher altitude parts of the mountain. So yes, it's very possible to do so, and there are many case studies that have been done in different parts of the world that show that it's very successful.
I think we probably have time for one more before we go to the reception, if anyone's got one.
Is there a hashtag for your project so we can spread the word on social media?
Oh, interesting. I've not created a hashtag. The one I use mostly on my social media is hashtag Explorer in America, which is me. But we can actually create a hashtag, and that would definitely assist in raising awareness. Thanks so much for that
That'd
idea.
be awesome. Let us know.
I'll definitely follow up with that. Thank you very much.